This is a short video discussing what is expected in Section 1 of Project 1 Rental Car. Let's start by reading through the directions. Step 1 in Section 1 says Request Rental Code. Step 2 says Request time period the car was rented. Step 3 says set the base charge for the rental type as the variable base charge. The base charge is the rental period times the appropriate rate. So let's start with Section 1. First of all, how do we get input from the user? In Codio, we get input from the user by using the input command. So if I want to get input, I have to ask a question and that will get me an answer. And then I have to put that answer someplace. So first thing I have to do is ask a question and get an answer. The way we ask, whoops, let's spell that right. The way we ask a question in Python and get a user to respond is by using the input command. Input is a function that we're given by Python, and it says somebody is going to give me something from the command line. And I'm going to ask the question, please enter the type of rental, budget, daily, or weekly rental. Actually, because it's easier, all I'm going to do is this, budget, daily, or weekly rental. So now let's see what happens when I try and run this script. So here's something new that we haven't played with yet before in Codio. It's the run current. Run current will take the current script that we're working on and it will run it in Python. So what you see here is it says Python rentalcar.py, and lo and behold, here's my question. This question, it directly relates to this input statement right here. So this input statement will print the question out to the command line and I can put in one of these answers. Now, what happened? Okay. File car rental line 13 input that error name B is not defined. Well, that's because we haven't given it any place to put the answer. So for this statement to be complete, because right now it's not, we have to give it a variable. And they tell us up here that that variable is rental code. So I'm going to say rental code equal input. And then just to make sure that my rental code is what I expect, I'm going to print rental code. I can spell. So let me run current again. And it asks for that, and I'm going to put in a B. Oh, wait a minute. This is a known issue with this current version of Python. Use the raw input command. And I'm going to do B, and I get B back. So my apologies. It's not the standard input for strings in this version of Python. For this particular compiler, you have to use raw input. So raw input will ask the question to the command line, and it will be put in rental code, and we proved that by printing out rental code. So that's our first raw input. Now the second is request the time period the car was rented. So we're going to prompt number of days rented or number of weeks rented. Number of days rented will be prompted if it's budget or daily, and number of weeks rented will be if the user puts in W. So here's where we have an if statement, because it's going to change based on what the first input is from the user. So if the first input, which is rental code, is B, or rental code is D, whoops, and we're going to say days rented. We're going to prompt days rented is input, number of days rented. Else, we're going to say weeks rented is, hold on, let me indent properly, always have to indent, is input, number of weeks rented. Now, I'm going to do something that's going to cause a problem, and then we'll talk about it in just a moment. So I'm going to print days rented, and then I'm going to print weeks rented. Okay? So I'm printing days rented and weeks rented. So let's see what happens when I run the code. I'm going to, what did I do? I did something very wrong here. I used a single equal here instead of a double equal. I caught myself in a syntax error. Always double equal when you're asking a question. And an if statement is a question. So here I'm going to say B for budget. Number of days rented is 3. Okay, so we have a problem here. It says weeks rented is not defined, and that's correct. Weeks rented isn't defined. Weeks rented is defined in this scope. So scope is where in the program it's defined and who can access it. If it's defined, as I said previously, inside an if or an else statement, its scope is inside the block of the if or the else statement. So to make sure that that's not happening, I'm going to define my helper variables. So I'm going to say days rented is going to be 0, and I'm going to say weeks rented is going to be 0. Days rented is 0 and weeks rented is 0 means that this days rented and this week's rented should print out appropriately. So days rented is 3, and we have 3 and 0. You'll notice we did not get the exception this time. So I will continue on with the remainder of Section 1 in the next video. This has been a short video on the first part of Section 1 for the rental car project.